Look closely at the architecture of your daily life. You call it peaceful. You tell yourself you are simply avoiding unnecessary drama. You take pride in being the bigger person, the one who walks away. The rational observer in a world addicted to noise, but remove the flattering labels for a moment. Look at the mechanics of this so-called tranquility. This is not composure. This is retreat. You have built a fortress of compliance. You nod when you disagree. You smile when you are disrespected. You swallow your objections until they feel like stones in your throat, and then you rationalize the silence. You tell yourself you are preserving the peace, but whose peace are you preserving? Certainly not your own. You are protecting the comfort of those who step on your boundaries. You are guarding the fragile egos of people who demand your silence. The price of their company is your voice. So you enter a quiet negotiation with the world, and in that negotiation, you agree to shrink. You trade your expansion for the hollow safety of silence. Every time you choose not to speak, a transaction takes place. You buy a brief moment without tension. But the currency is expensive. You pay with your agency. You pay with pieces of your self-respect. Think about the physical sensation of biting your tongue, the sudden rise of your heartbeat, the heat spreading through your chest, the careful relaxation of your face, so no one notices the objection forming in your mind. That is not the physiology of a peaceful mind. That is the physiology of suppressed panic, the biological response of a cornered animal, choosing to play dead instead of fighting. We often mistake cowardice for composure, because composure looks better in the mirror. It is a very effective disguise. Society rewards the compliant. It praises the easygoing. It tells you that being agreeable means being good. But agreeableness driven by fear is a slow poison, and it is the reason many people live small. You see others who take up space, people who assert their will, people who shape their environment, instead of merely surviving it. You might call them aggressive. You might judge them for being difficult, but beneath that judgment, there is something quieter, envy, because they are willing to endure the friction that you spend your entire life avoiding. They understand something fundamental. Peace is not the absence of tension. Real peace comes from resolved conflict. The silence you're living in right now is not resolution. It is a ceasefire, negotiated by a hostage, and the hostage is you. You have taken yourself captive just to avoid the discomfort of disagreement. So you build a shell, a fragile, conflict-free shell. You shape your environment so no one challenges you. You shape your relationships so no boundary is ever needed. And eventually, you mistake the walls of your cage for a sanctuary, but a shell is still a limitation. It quietly decides how much you're allowed to grow. Every conversation you avoid, every boundary you fail to enforce, every truth you leave unspoken. They do not disappear. They are stored in the body, archived in the mind, and over time, they decay into something slow, something quiet, resentment. Let us examine something carefully: the anatomy of an unspoken truth. An unvoiced truth does not disappear. It simply changes form. When you swallow an objection, it does not vanish into the air. It sinks straight into your gut. It becomes weight, a dense mass of reality left unsaid. You might think you're managing the situation. You might believe you're exercising restraint, but what you are really doing is hoarding poison. Every time you nod at a lie, every time you accept something unfair, every time you let a slight pass without consequence, the stockpile grows slowly, quietly. The mind is not empty space. It is an ecosystem, and unspoken truths are toxic waste. They rot patiently, methodically, until they transform into something deeper: resentment. Look carefully at the people around you, the ones you claim to love, your colleagues, your family. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. How many of those interactions are real? And how many are performances? Carefully choreographed routines designed to walk around the massive things you are too afraid to say, because beneath the surface, there is resentment. You resent them for crossing boundaries you never drew. You resent them for failing to read your mind. You resent them for being comfortable while you suffer quietly. But the resentment is misplaced. It should not be directed at them. It should be directed inward. You built this structure. You designed the walls. You locked the door, and then you swallowed the key. Avoiding conflict is not peace. It is self-abandonment. When a moment requires friction and you offer submission, your nervous system learns something dangerous. It learns that your needs do not matter, and slowly you begin to believe it, that you are not worth the discomfort of an argument. This is how influence disappears. This is how a voice fades. This is how power quietly atrophies. Influence requires presence. It requires taking a stance. It requires the willingness to be disliked momentarily for the sake of long-term respect, but you have traded respect for likability. A cheap, fragile likability. One that shatters the moment you stop being convenient. You are not respected, you are merely tolerated. Because you are easy to manage, your opinions carry no weight. Everyone knows you will abandon them. The moment they are challenged, your presence is a shadow, a non-entity, a placeholder in your own life. Notice how your posture changes when you inhabit this hollowed-out state. Your shoulders round, your gaze drops. You physically occupy less space in a room. Your body language broadcasts your internal surrender. Long before you even open your mouth to agree, you are shrinking, literally and metaphorically. You construct a life that is small enough to be safe. You avoid ambitious projects because they require managing difficult people. You avoid deep relationships because they require absolute honesty. You settle for mediocrity because excellence demands friction, the friction of failure, critique, and confrontation. Mediocrity is the ultimate sanctuary for the conflict avoidant. It asks nothing of you. It challenges nothing in you. It is a warm, numb existence. It slowly drains your vitality until you have nothing left to offer. Your unvoiced truths do not protect your relationships. They slowly assassinate them. The silence breeds distance. The distance breeds apathy, until one day you look at the person across the table and realize you are sharing a life with a stranger, and you are a stranger to them because they only know the mask you wear to keep the peace. Think about the immense cognitive load required to maintain this mask. You are constantly scanning the environment, constantly reading the room, analyzing micro-expressions, anticipating what the other person wants to hear, just so you can deliver it to them before tension arises. You are operating as a human algorithm, predicting, adapting, neutralizing. This is exhausting. Chronic fatigue is the shadow of chronic avoidance. You are tired, not because you are doing too much, but because you are constantly suppressing so much. It takes a monumental amount of psychic energy to hold down your authentic reactions day after day, year after year. And for what? To preserve an illusion, to maintain a sterile environment where nothing grows, nothing evolves, and nothing is ever truly resolved. Let us look at the raw biology of your cowardice. You are wired for survival. Your nervous system is an ancient mechanism designed to detect threats. When you face conflict, your brain does not distinguish between a physical predator and a disappointed manager. The amygdala fires. Cortisol floods your veins. The primitive instruction is clear: fight, flight, or freeze. Most of you freeze. You call it being diplomatic, but your biology calls it playing dead. You appease the threat. You offer submission as a currency for survival. In a tribal setting, defying the hierarchy meant exile and death. Your DNA remembers this. Your DNA whispers that compliance is safety, but you do not live in a tribe. You live in a modern construct. Exile from a disagreement does not mean death. It simply means temporary discomfort. Yet, you react as if your life is on the line. Every time someone questions your methods or crosses a line, you have let an ancient survival mechanism become the dictator of your modern existence. You use biology as an alibi for your lack of backbone. You tell yourself, I am just not a confrontational person, as if it is an immutable personality trait, rather than a series of weak choices repeated over decades. This brings us to the architecture of fake harmony. Look around your workplace. Look at your social circles. Observe the intricate dance of forced smiles and polite nods. This is not a community. This is a hostage situation, where everyone is simultaneously the captor and the captive. Fake harmony is an aesthetic. It looks like peace, but it functions like a gag. It requires everyone to collectively agree to ignore the elephant in the room, the incompetence of a colleague, the manipulation of a friend, the subtle disrespect from a partner. You all see it, but the unspoken rule of fake harmony dictates that whoever points it out becomes the villain. So, you stay silent. You participate in the charade. You become an accomplice to the very behaviors that make you miserable. By refusing to introduce friction, you enable the dysfunction. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a co-conspirator. Friction is not the enemy. Friction is the only mechanism through which raw materials are shaped. Without friction, a blade remains dull. Without friction, a muscle atrophies. Without the friction of opposing ideas, the intellect stagnates. You view conflict as a destructive force, completely blind to its utility as a refining fire. When you avoid a necessary argument, you are robbing the relationship of its ability to evolve. You are trapping it in a state of perpetual immaturity. You treat the people around you as if they are too fragile to handle the truth, but in reality, it is you who are too fragile to handle their reaction to the truth. You project your own weakness onto them. You assume they will shatter. If you say no, you assume the relationship will collapse. If you demand respect, let us establish a fundamental rule. If a relationship cannot survive the introduction of a boundary, it was never a relationship. It was a parasitic arrangement, and you were the host. Let that reality settle in your mind. You are actively protecting parasitic arrangements because you are terrified of the empty space that might follow their termination. You prefer the slow drain of being used over the sharp, cold reality of standing alone. Consider the physical exhaustion of this performance. You return home, not tired from labor, but drained from the act of pretending. You need hours to decompress, staring blankly at screens, trying to numb the cognitive dissonance of living a lie all day. Let us dissect the mechanism of a boundary. A boundary is not a request. It is not a suggestion. It is a rigid line drawn in the sand of your own reality. It dictates what you will accept and what you will reject. But you treat your boundaries as opening offers in a negotiation. You state what you need, and the moment you sense resistance, you immediately begin to backtrack. You dilute your own terms. You apologize for having limits. You soften your stance until the boundary becomes a blur, easily stepped over by anyone with a marginally stronger will than your own. Why do you negotiate your own dignity? Because you are terrified of the alternative, and the alternative to compliance is isolation. This is the bleak core of your conflict avoidance. It has absolutely nothing to do with being a good person. It has everything to do with a profound, unacknowledged fear of abandonment. You look at the prospect of standing your ground, and your mind projects a wasteland. You believe that any company, no matter how toxic, draining, or dismissive, is inherently superior to solitude. You sell your self-respect at a steep discount to secure a seat at a table where you are not even valued. You let people walk over you because you are gripped by the paralyzing thought that if you stand up, they will walk away. And let us be entirely clear, you are right. They will walk away. Parasites always leave. When the host becomes inhospitable, when you finally speak a hard truth, when you finally introduce the necessary friction of a firm no, the people who relied on your silence will vanish. The relationships built entirely on your submission will collapse instantly. This is what terrifies you, the sudden, deafening silence of a room emptied of the people you used to please. So, to prevent this exodus, you curate a life of quiet desperation. You surround yourself with individuals who do not know the real you, simply because you have never had the courage to introduce them to the real you. You are surrounded by bodies, yet you are profoundly, fundamentally alone. This is the ultimate paradox of your compliance. In your desperate, frantic attempt to avoid physical isolation, you have completely isolated your true self from the world. Your interactions are not relationships. They are rehearsals. You are reading from a script designed to offend no one. They read their lines. You read yours. Nobody deviates. Nobody introduces sudden movements. Nobody speaks the truth. You call this a social circle. I call it a synchronized coping mechanism. You are a group of people terrified of the dark, huddling together and silently agreeing never to mention the shadows. To set a boundary is to turn on the harsh, unforgiving light. It is to expose the cracks in the foundation of your connections. It forces an immediate reckoning. It demands to know who is there for you and who is merely there for what they can extract from your passivity. But you prefer the dark. The dark hides your lack of structure. It obscures the humiliating fact that you have no core identity. Independent of the people you are desperately trying to appease, you have become an amalgamation of other people's expectations, a formless mirror reflecting whatever they want to see. If you shatter that mirror with a boundary, who are you? You do not know. And that is exactly why you run from the conflict. The conflict would require you to defend a core self that you have not yet built. It is easier to remain a hostage than to do the grueling work of constructing a spine. Science is isolation. This is the bleak core of your conflict avoidance. It has absolutely nothing to do with being a good person. It has everything to do with a profound, unacknowledged fear of abandonment. You look at the prospect of standing your ground, and your mind projects a wasteland. You believe that any company, no matter how toxic, draining, or dismissive, is inherently superior to solitude. You sell your self-respect at a steep discount. To secure a seat at a table where you are not even valued, you let people walk over you because you are gripped by the paralyzing thought that if you stand up, they will walk away. And let us be entirely clear, you are right. They will walk away. Parasites always leave. When the host becomes inhospitable, when you finally speak a hard truth, when you finally introduce the necessary friction of a firm no, the people who relied on your silence will vanish. The relationships built entirely on your submission will collapse instantly. This is what terrifies you, the sudden, deafening silence of a room emptied of the people you used to please. So, to prevent this exodus, you curate a life of quiet desperation. You surround yourself with individuals who do not know the real you, simply because you have never had the courage to introduce them to the real you. You are surrounded by bodies, yet you are profoundly, fundamentally alone. This is the ultimate paradox of your compliance. In your desperate, frantic attempt to avoid physical isolation, you have completely isolated your true self from the world. Your interactions are not relationships. They are rehearsals. You are reading from a script designed to offend no one. They read their lines. You read yours. Nobody deviates. Nobody introduces sudden movements. Nobody speaks the truth. You call this a social circle. I call it a synchronized coping mechanism. You are a group of people terrified terrified of the dark, huddling together and silently agreeing never to mention the shadows. To set a boundary is to turn on the harsh, unforgiving light. It is to expose the cracks in the foundation of your connections. It forces an immediate reckoning. It demands to know who is there for you and who is merely there for what they can extract from your passivity. But you prefer the dark. The dark hides your lack of structure. It obscures the humiliating fact that you have no core identity. Independent of the people you are desperately trying to appease, you have become an amalgamation of other people's expectations, a formless mirror reflecting whatever they want to see. If you shatter that mirror with a boundary, who are you? You do not know. And that is exactly why you run from the conflict. The conflict would require you to defend a core self that you have not yet built. It is easier to remain a hostage than to do the grueling work of constructing a spine. Let us examine the currency of human interaction. You have been taught a fundamental lie about respect. You believe it is a default setting. You assume that if you are polite, accommodating, and invisible, respect will naturally be bestowed upon you as a reward for your good behavior. This is the delusion of the powerless. Respect is not a participation trophy handed out for merely existing in a shared space. Respect is an extraction. It is a boundary enforced. It is the friction generated when an immovable object meets an entitled force. When you systematically avoid conflict, you are actively removing yourself from the economy of respect. You become a utility, a convenience. You are the infrastructure upon which other people build their ambitions and manage their emotional regulation. Think of the dynamics. In any room you enter, power is never static. It is constantly being negotiated, texted, and reallocated. Every time a colleague interrupts you and you stop talking, a transaction occurs. Every time a friend makes a subtle dig at your expense and you force a laugh, a transaction occurs. You are transferring your power to them, willingly, silently. You rationalize this by telling yourself you are choosing your battles. You tell yourself it is not worth the argument, but you are not choosing your battles. You are simply surrendering before the first shot is fired, and the people around you know it. They possess an unconscious radar for compliance. They test the perimeter of your self-esteem. They throw a minor insult. They make an unreasonable request. They push the line just an inch into your territory. And what do? You retreat. You redraw the map to accommodate their invasion. You send a clear, biological signal to their nervous system. This territory is undefended. Take what you need. There are no monsters hiding in the shadows of your daily life. There are only opportunists, and opportunists feed exclusively on the conflict avoidant. They do not respect you because there is nothing there to respect. You cannot respect a void. You can only fill it. You complain about being used. You write long, agonizing internal monologues about how unfairly you are treated by your partner, your boss, your family. But you are angry at the fire for burning the wood. You willingly threw into it. You are complicit in your own subjugation. By refusing to introduce the friction of a no, you become an accomplice to your own erasure. You are not a victim of their dominance. You are the primary sponsor of it. You mistake being useful for being valued. A hammer is useful, a doormat is useful, but neither is respected. They are picked up when needed and discarded when the job is done. This is your social strategy. You have decided that it is better to be a tool in someone else's hands than a standalone entity that requires defending. Because to be a standalone entity means you must occasionally clash with other entities. It means you must risk being called difficult. It means you must survive the acute discomfort of someone else's disapproval. But you are addicted to approval, even fake approval, even the condescending approval a master gives to an obedient dog. Let us bring this to its natural, inevitable conclusion. Look closely at the perimeter of the world you currently inhabit. Look at the walls you have constructed. They are very close, are they not? You did not start out with such a confined space. You shrunk it yourself, piece by piece, argument by argument avoided. Every time you chose the path of least resistance, the walls moved in an inch. Every time you swallowed a truth to keep a fragile peace, the ceiling lowered. You have successfully engineered a life where nothing unexpected happens, where no one is offended, where you are never challenged, and in doing so, you have engineered your own irrelevance. You are a ghost, haunting your own existence. You watch other people live, collide, break, and rebuild. You observe the mess of genuine human connection from the sterile safety of your conflict-free shell. You call it observing. I call it hiding. You must understand that the tension you spend your life running from is the only evidence that you actually exist. When two objects occupy the same space, there is friction. When two minds meet, there is disagreement. When two wills intersect, there is conflict. To eliminate the conflict is to eliminate your mass. It is to make yourself weightless, invisible, a non-entity. You are terrified of being the bad guy in someone else's narrative. You are paralyzed by the thought that someone, somewhere, might be upset with a boundary you finally decided to set. So you make yourself the victim in your own narrative instead. It is a pathetic trade. You trade your expansion for the illusion of safety. You trade your voice for the comfort of the herd, but the herd does not care about you. The herd only cares that you do not disrupt its grazing. You have a choice to make, though history suggests you will likely refuse to make it. You can continue to lubricate the machinery of your life with your own suppressed resentment. You can continue to smile at the disrespect. You can continue to shrink until one day there is nothing left to shrink, until the shell closes completely and you suffocate in the airtight, comfortable silence of your own making. Or you can introduce the friction. You can step into the fire of a necessary confrontation. You can let the parasitic relationships burn. You can let the fake harmony shatter. It will be excruciating. You will shake. Your voice will tremble. People will leave. Let them. Let the dead wood burn away. Let the hollow connections collapse. What remains standing after the fire is the only thing that was ever real. We must dismantle the lie. That peace is merely the absence of tension. True peace is the silence that follows a battle you actually had the courage to fight. The silence you have now is merely a waiting room for your regrets.